Have you ever asked yourself why certain types of people keep finding you? Why your life seems to cycle through versions of the same connection, chaotic, intense, magnetic? I used to think it was fate, that I was chosen to help, that I was here to guide or fix or uplift the people who fell into my orbit. But over time, I started questioning that narrative. I started noticing patterns that weren't just mystical. They were psychological, repetitive, exhausting, familiar in a way that felt more ancestral than intentional. And I wondered, what if they weren't coming to be saved? What if they were coming to show me something about myself I wasn't ready to see? I noticed it first in conversations. The way I would lean in when someone's voice trembled. The way I instinctively offered solutions instead of silence. The way I felt alive when someone broke down in front of me, like I had been activated. Like finally, there was something for me to fix, something to pour my energy into. At first, I thought it was empathy. I thought I was being a good person. And maybe I was. But it wasn't just compassion, it was compulsion. It wasn't just love, it was survival. Something in me felt more comfortable in crisis than in peace. More at home in emotional chaos than in mutual calm. It wasn't until I felt burned out, again, that I realized I was repeating something. Not consciously, but deeply. I was entering relationships like a firefighter, waiting for the sirens, ready to rush in. I didn't know who I was without that role. And I didn't know how to receive love that wasn't earned through effort. I've since learned that our nervous systems remember. That emotional blueprints from childhood become scripts we unconsciously follow in adulthood. If you grew up around unpredictability, your brain wires itself for hypervigilance. You become skilled at reading moods, fixing problems, absorbing tension, and that skill becomes your identity. It's not that I wanted chaos, but calm made me suspicious. When someone didn't need me, I didn't know how to connect. I didn't know how to be seen without proving my value. So I kept finding people who needed saving. Not because I was a savior, but because I was scared to just be. Caretaker, empath, therapist, old soul. These are the names I gave the roles I played. But beneath those titles was fear. A fear of abandonment, a fear of irrelevance, a fear that if I wasn't useful, I'd be discarded. So I leaned into their pain. I made space. I took on their trauma like it was a shared assignment. But the more I carried, the heavier I felt. And the more I gave, the more resentment built. Because I wasn't being met, only needed. And I confused that need for intimacy. I thought chaos meant depth. I thought dysfunction meant destiny. Looking back, I can see it now. I wasn't drawn to people because they were broken. I was drawn because they mirrored the parts of me I hadn't healed. Each person was a different angle of the same mirror, showing me what I had ignored in myself. My own abandonment wounds, my own suppressed anger, my own disconnection from peace. We think we're drawn to people for who they are, but often we're drawn to how they make us feel, needed, wanted, strong. And when that dynamic breaks, we feel lost. Because we weren't building connection, we were reenacting a role. Close your eyes for a moment. Think of the last person who pulled you in deeply. Not because of safety, but because of intensity. Ask yourself, what part of me did they reflect back? What wound did they trigger? What role did I take on in that story? Now breathe. What would it feel like to love without trying to fix? What would it feel like to be chosen for your presence, not your performance? I used to think it was spiritual, that I was a light worker, a soul magnet, a divine helper. And maybe, in some ways, I was. But now I also know this. The brain seeks familiarity. The nervous system seeks survival. The ego seeks purpose. And when those three combine, we build identities around helping others, often at the cost of ourselves. Awakening for me wasn't mystical. It was biological. It was emotional. It was psychological. It was unlearning the belief that my worth depended on my usefulness. It was realizing that rescuing people isn't the same as relating to them. There's a kind of fatigue that comes from being everyone's safe space but your own. There's a kind of loneliness that comes from being the one who holds without ever being held. I didn't know I was disappearing in those dynamics. I didn't know that always being the strong one was a trauma response. I didn't know that constantly understanding others came from rarely feeling understood. Eventually, I burned out. Emotionally, energetically, existentially. And in that burnout, I met the parts of myself I had been avoiding. The scared child, the performer, the overachiever, the one who only felt safe when needed. I had to learn how to sit with myself, without a project, without a mission, without someone else's chaos to distract me. I had to learn to value stillness, to find beauty in peace, to allow connection without imbalance. And that was the hardest work of all. Take a breath. Now ask yourself, who am I without the people I try to fix? What am I afraid will happen if I stop helping? What does love look like when it's not tied to emotional labor? What if you were worthy even when you do nothing? My awakening wasn't loud. It wasn't some cosmic download. It wasn't a lightning bolt of truth. It was slow, subtle, almost unnoticeable. It came in quiet decisions. To not text back, to not overextend, to say, that's not mine to carry. It came in the stillness after someone left, and I didn't chase. It came in the moments I chose myself, not out of selfishness, but out of wholeness. Now I connect differently. I choose people who see me, not just need me. I let love be mutual, not transactional. And when I feel that old urge to fix, I pause. I ask, what part of me is speaking right now? Is it love or is it fear? That's the shift, from compulsion to consciousness, from performance to presence, from survival to stillness. So to anyone who spent their life trying to save others, who's built their worth around being needed, who's attracted to the broken, not because you're broken too, but because you learned to survive that way. You're not wrong. You're not bad. You were conditioned. And now, you're awakening. Not because you've become someone else, but because you're finally meeting the version of you who doesn't have to fix in order to be whole. I release the role of the rescuer. I choose connection over control. And I allow myself to be seen without saving anyone. This is what it means to love from wholeness.